Hello again, this is Shannon with Modern Traditional Quilts. Today we are working on our 9-patch charm square sampler quilt-along. Today we'll be working on the ribbon block. So we're excited to meet with you today. This is our 7th episode, so block number 6. First episode was how to make half square triangles. And so we're making a lot of progress on this quilt. Just as we've talked about in the past, we do have a plan for how we're progressing through this quilt. This is episode number 7, and it shows us how to make block number 6. We have our quilt layout diagram for you up there on the screen. We can see it's the one in the bottom left-hand corner. If we look at the photo, it's in the bottom right-hand corner because we took a picture with the quilt on its side, but that's okay. With it being a sampler, you can rotate the quilt any direction you want to, and it still looks a lot of fun. So today, we're doing June's block, the ribbon block. And this one was a little bit more tricky with the color placement. When we talked about this in the past, I said I wanted to try to do like a focus color for each block instead of doing it randomly or scrappy colors. The quilt layout diagram has it done in scrappy colors and random. So I thought I'd show you how I layered this one out. Alright, so I want to show you how I did this one because a lot of times our charm square packages or layer cake packages have what they call low volume prints, or they might be a print on a white background, and they can be from time to time a little bit challenging to use. And so I wanted to show you that I can still use these squares that are a print on a white background with a white background to get some contrast, and show you a little bit of a trick to make that work. Alright, so the trick to making these types of prints work for you is a trick that I learned from an art teacher in an art class, and just realize that we have 2 vision types. We have black and white, and then we also have cones that also see in color. And so when you're laying out your quilt blocks, you want to squint at them. And if I take this picture, and I do have a blurry image up there on the screen, if you squint at it, you can actually, your eyes will pick up these heavier, bigger blotches of color against the white background. And so if I squint at it, I still see the ribbon block coming out. Yes, it is technically white fabric on white fabric, which most people would say, no, like your quilt police would say, don't do that, don't do that. But in this case, if we use that black and white kind of trick and squint at it and make it look at it kind of blurry, you can still see your colors present. And so we can still see the block changing form. If you don't like that, you can use the scrappy version that I did in the original quilts test trial, or you can switch it and use a different color scheme. But I like to use all the blocks in my charm square packages, even the white on white ones, because I think they're expensive and I think they're nice quality fabrics, and I don't see the point in not using everything that I have. So when we work on this block, we're going to do the same thing, the traditional piecing that we have been doing in the past. We're going to start with column 1, layer column 2 onto column 1, sew down the seam. I've got the line drawn in blue. Then sew column 3 on top of column 2, sew the blue line that you see on your screen, and then layer column 4 on top of column 3. Okay, so you can see I've got myself laid out at my sewing table. I'm going to take column 2, flip it on top of column 1, again column 2 on top of column 1. And for beginners, I recommend that you just piece. And if you know your head's up, then you know your block is in the correct orientation. Usually the hardest thing about these particular quilts is making sure your blocks are in the correct orientation. So I'm going to do that and sew down this row. Didn't quite pin that completely aligned the way I should have. I don't cut the thread in between. I call this chain piecing, and the reason is that this thread will actually act as a pin when we go to do our crosswise rows. Okay, so we have row 2 sewn on top of row 1. And when I bring this over, I want to be really careful to make sure that my half crochet triangles don't accidentally flip. I've done that before. And then I had to unpick. I once saw a clip that said unpicking is not unpicking. We don't say that. We call it reverse sewing. I thought that was funny. All right, so I'm going to finger press these open. And the reason I'm just finger pressing instead of hot steam pressing or permanent pressing is because I want to make sure that I look at the back before I do any permanent pressing. I may want to move my seam to opposite directions, but we'll get to that before we sew our horizontals. So let's go back to our columns. I'm going to take row 3, lay it on top of row 2, and you might want to put a little pin. I like to put the pin head to the top and pointing towards me. That way I know that I'm sewing the right direction. My mother always told me to make the pin head go away from you, which also works. But I'm going to go sew this row. Excuse me, I said row, I meant column. I'm going to go sew that column. In case you're wondering why I keep pushing that lever, I know people say don't backstitch with patchwork quilting because your cross seams will catch it, but I still backstitch. My mom taught me to do that, and it's just a habit I've never been able to break. Okay, so we've got column 3 sewn on top of column 2. Sure, I have my orientation. I'm just going to flip everything out. Flip everything open, kind of finger press it. Make sure my block orientation matches my diagram. And then now I can take column 4, lay it on top of column 3, and sew this vertical seam down. And I won't make you watch me do that. All right, so you can see we've sewn all of our columns. We haven't pressed it yet because we want to be able to check for bulky seams on the back, places where we could get a lot of fabric and thread building up. You want to make sure these are pressed in the correct method and opposite of each other. Like in the middle that we're going to have here, we're going to have 2 of them that are going to press up against one another right here. This is going to be a particularly difficult seam. If you were using an edge long arm machine and you hit something like this, it might actually either break your needle or push your quilt the wrong direction and make kind of a bobble in your quilting. So we're going to go look at different ways to press these, and we want to make sure we press in opposite directions so that we can reduce bulk. So instead of taking this whole thing over the ironing board and watching me do it, I thought it would be more useful to make a diagram to show you how we're going to reduce bulk, okay? Basically, we want our rows to go in opposite directions. So if you look at our bottom row, we're going to have 2 red ones going to the left and then 1 going to the right. And the reason is that we want this seam right here to be the opposite direction of the row above it. And if we look, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different pieces of fabric coming into that point. And so we want to make sure that we press it towards the dark and press it in a manner that it will lay flat. So because we do that, we're going to go the opposite direction on our blue row. And so you can see that we've got a little bit of a diagram here, making sure that our seams go opposite one another. The nice thing about nested seams too, when we don't have to cut the threads in between our rows, those threads can now begin to act like pins for us. We can feel how, by pushing the fabric between our fingers, how those seams can actually push against each other, interlock, and make a more sturdy quilt top. The other thing to remember is I call this X marks the spot. Okay, we want to have sharp points. We don't want to blunt them off. And so the way that you do that is think about your seam line, and I drew a yellow line on this so that you could see where my seam threads were going. And this diagram also has an orange line on it. You're going to see an X. You want your sewing machine needle to go just outside of the X so that doesn't get cut off. Then when you fold your rows together, you're going to make sure that your seam lines that are vertical or horizontal connect with one another. So that's a really great way to make sure that you get sharp points, really crisp piecing, and not too much bulk in your seams. So I'm going to go ahead and press mine, then sew my crosswise rows, and is our next step. Okay, when I'm doing a block like this, I like to start with my center and then move my way out. And so I just wanted to show you that for this particular clip. We're technically doing the rows now, and I've got everything pressed, and you can feel those seams nesting, and so we're ready to go. Sometimes I have to flip the seam on the bottom. It might get caught in my feed dogs. No big deal, just we can feel that nesting and just make sure it's correct. You usually have to check each seam as you go. I do at least. It really does help to reduce bulk and keep you from breaking needles. It also helps if you are choosing to use machine quilting to make sure things lay flat. Okay, so if you look at this, the center is sewn. And now I'm going to go back and do my other parts. Okay, so our ribbon block is completely sewn. And I'm just going to take over to the board and make sure I press it completely flat. So one of the things that I have challenge with personally as a quilter is that when I look at things, I realize that I can use these blocks and repeat them over and over and over again and stack them, and I can make a totally new quilt pattern. Problem is, there's more quilt patterns and more ideas than there is time to quilt them all. So for fun, here is what a ribbon quilt pattern would look like if you were to take this block, sew it 4 times, and stack it 1, 2, 3, 4. You would get this ribbon pattern and would look oscillating. If you wanted to take this half square triangles video that we made, take your charm square packages, make them all HSTs, and then sew them only in this block, you would make 9 blocks. You could take out the sashing and you could make this kind of tesseract looking quilt. So I'd call it a ribbon quilt, and I hope you enjoy that idea. There's different ways to use these blocks. And so I hope you enjoy this project, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.